Sure. All right, my name is Johnathan Martin. This is Mary Jane, and we're presenting CryptoNight tonight. And CryptoNight's part of an informational series we'll be providing on how small businesses can help themselves by using technology that seems a bit more on the advanced scale, but that can work out for small businesses. Mary Jane, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Mary Jane Sanchez, owner of WurkHub Digital Marketing, Downtown Waukesha. We develop a lot of creative work that can go into marketing any business. We lead with branding. We're WordPress house. We do a lot of WordPress websites, hosting, digital marketing media, and general marketing for clients. So we've been, I myself have been in business since 06, and as WurkHub since 2015.
Okay. And I'm Johnathan. Originally, my involvement in Bitcoin was back in 2011 when it was still fairly new. So I bought into Bitcoin when it was trading at like $1.13, and now it's at $6,000. So I had the opportunity to strike it rich, just like anyone who invested in Apple. But I did what most of them did and sold out early too. So here I am. And then FitTech hosting, we're mainly a hosting company, but we've really expanded to helping small businesses move into the 21st century by applying those technologies such as cryptocurrency or advanced telecommunications to their business. And FitTech hosting, we've been in business just for a little over a year now. I've been doing freelance personally in the cryptocurrency and web development industry for about 4 to 5 years now. And also, if you don't mind, you can take out your phone and connect with us on LinkedIn. Just in case you have any questions after you leave, don't hesitate to reach out. I love answering any questions, and it doesn't matter what day it is or what time it is. And to start off, we're going to go over a brief overview about what Bitcoin is, and then talk about the legality and regulation of Bitcoin, which is one of the most controversial topics I hear, that people are afraid to use Bitcoin because they're not sure if it's legal, or they've heard of people doing illegal things with Bitcoin that dissuades them from using it. And then most importantly, how Bitcoin can help your business or help you individually. So cryptocurrency, what is it? So back in 2009, Bitcoin was created by the anonymous founder, Satoshi Nakamoto. And Satoshi kind of remained anonymous just because he didn't want to be influenced by banks. Obviously, Bitcoin is a disruptive topic to banks because they're not getting their fees, they're not being the center of every financial transaction anymore. So he didn't want to deal with any fame or publicity or corruption. He wanted to separate himself from it. So what he did is he created the software, created a white paper, and released it to the community. And he really didn't get anything in return aside from just the mind of good doing. And May of 2010 was the first purchase made with Bitcoin, which was 10,000 Bitcoins, and purchased 2 pizzas from Domino's, I believe. And that value today would be over $63 million. People better have done 2 good pizzas. And then February of 2011 was quite the monumental thing for Bitcoin, just because one Bitcoin equaled $1. And that was the first time it got real value. That before it was always like a penny stock trading at 17 cents, maybe 20 cents to 25 cents. And then February of 2014, this is when Bitcoin really got involved in the news. It was the Mt. Gox scandal. And Mt. Gox was one of the large Bitcoin exchanges where you can sell your Bitcoins for US dollars or buy Bitcoins for US dollars. And they didn't have their security up to date, so they got hacked, and lots of people lost money in that. And as bad as it was really an educational experience for all the other companies out there, because they realized that there are people trying to take over. And with Bitcoin, Bitcoin is 100% secure as long as you follow certain practices. So right now, as of this morning, Bitcoin was trading at $6,396. And like you saw before, it was trading at $1 only a few years ago. So it's growing incredibly fast. And that's something that kind of scares people too, but also shows there's a lot of future growth for it. And aside from just the investment side standpoint, there's also a lot of other features to help the business. So as you can see, these are the prices of Bitcoin on August 15th of each year. And there's been a few dips and bubbles, but as you can see, it's still increasing from 7 cents, then we go to 5.82, 4,179, and then 6,090. So as you can see, right now we're on that upward trend and we keep increasing, which is good news. And there might be a couple more dips, but I still think that within the next 10 years that we're still going to be a lot higher than we are right now. And that's speculative. So what is the purpose of Bitcoin? I promise this is the most intensive part of this presentation. The Satoshi Nakamoto, when he released this software, he also released a white paper explaining what Bitcoin is and why it's here. So Bitcoin was created to create a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash that would allow payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is required to prevent double spending. We propose a solution to the double spending problem by using a peer-to-peer network. The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. The longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that came from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as the majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace the attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcasted on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of chain as proof of what happened after they're gone. Now to break that down into bite-sized chunks, a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. So what that means is that person A can send a payment to person B, and there's no need for a middleman. And people think they can do that with PayPal. You pull out your PayPal app, send money to a friend, you send them $20, and they get the $20. The only problem with that is it's still revolving around PayPal. PayPal can see that information, they can sell it, they can charge you fees, you're at their mercy. With Bitcoin, it's 100% decentralized where you're acting as the bank more or less. So you send a payment from person A to person B, only person B sees it, only person B receives it. And then the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is required to prevent double spending. So for example, if you were to go into a store right now and buy $50 worth of groceries, but you only have $20 in your checking account, the store is not going to allow that charge to go through. The computers will call the bank, and the bank will say that there's not enough money in this checking account. And that works great because the bank doesn't have to deal with the fraudulent charge or bounce checks. But again, that bank is that centralized point that the bank could say, yes, there's enough money to go through, and it could be wrong, and the store could get stuck with that. And then that's why companies get charged 3% or 4% to process credit cards. That's why consumers get charged these fees by banks, because they're the ones verifying each and every transaction. And with Bitcoin, Bitcoin was created so there doesn't have to be that person where everybody that's running Bitcoin is verifying the transactions without having to do any manual work.
Okay. I'll pipe in here and there. One of the big things that a lot of web developers do is they set up gateways for payment systems. And as we all know, brick and mortar stores have really been reduced in size and definitely in inventory, except for the big distribution centers, which will supply the product to the strategic locations. But with that, one of the trending things is that businesses are starting to look at ways that they can actually use Bitcoins to do transactions. And as our clients look to us for ways for more profit centers or ease of payments, and as we all know how many times accounts are hacked, there's some other safer ways, as Johnathan's pointing out, ways that we can do business. We can do commerce online, because that's the way everything has gone. Rarely do you see people have cash in their pockets much anymore. And the students, the kids, these days are all using apps like Venmo. Everything is digital. And as a digital marketer and as a IT and host provider, it's our job to be looking at upward trends and how we can apply those for the benefit of our clients and the community.
And that's an excellent point about the security behind it, that there's a Target breach where Target was improperly storing credit cards, and these credit cards got stolen, hackers used them to buy their own purchases, and the people might have gotten their money back that were hacked by it, but it was still a long, drawn-out process. And that's kind of where Bitcoin comes in too, that once you send Bitcoin, it's spent. They can't use your wallet again to spend more Bitcoin from it. Each transaction is unique. So like your credit card, it's always going to be the same 16 digits. With Bitcoin, it's 180 digits that are unique every time that you obviously don't have to remember. And the network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. So this is where the common word blockchain comes into. That the blockchain's audible log, kind of like your log where you write your checks, and it shows the exact second that transaction was sent and how much it was for. So a use case for this is your landlord, that you pay him on the 20th of every month, and you could backdate a check, send it on the 25th, backdate it to the 20th. That landlord has to wait on the money. There's no proof that you actually sent it late, so he doesn't charge you a late fee. With Bitcoin, you can prove that 1, he received the money, and 2, the date it was sent on. And that's works in that kind of scenario, but in higher tech scenarios, people can store audible information such as clock-in times. So there's nothing to stop the HR director from clocking in by changing the hours to make herself work an extra 7 hours every week just because she has access to that. With the blockchain, as soon as you clock in, it gets sent there and no one can change it. It's locked into that 100%. And that's the thing too, that there's no Bitcoin CEO. That is all on this network of thousands or millions now of other computers. So to actually change that record, you'd have to change it on millions of computers, which is nearly impossible. So security is a great standpoint of Bitcoin, not only for itself, but just for the application purposes it has. And then the longest chain serves as proof that came from the largest pool of CPU power. So there's nothing stopping somebody, since Bitcoin is just software, there's nothing stopping somebody from creating their own version of Bitcoin, changing from zeros to ones, and giving themselves 5,000 Bitcoins of their own just out thin air. They could do that, they could send it, but what happens is that there's all the other nodes, the millions of other nodes, and transactions require 51% consensus. So they'd have to do a 51% attack, gain control of those 51% of nodes to actually change the transaction in it. And even if you have that 51%, that just allows you to change the past 3 transactions, and it's still a very trivial process. And it's more so of a theoretical vulnerability, just because there's been a lot of work to prevent something like that from happening. But it shows you the thought that was put behind it, just to make everything decentralized.
Johnathan, could you re-explain nodes, because I think that's an important part
Definitely.
Of the details here.
So right now, websites, like if you go to CNN.com, it sends a request to Time Warner Cable if you have Time Warner Cable, and then it sends a request to the other internet provider, and then it finally gets to CNN servers. So you have to send your request to their servers. So the servers there might be getting 1,000 requests a minute. But how nodes work is that each one is individually connected. So if you're having a website on a node, it would rather send it to all computers, so you can connect to any computer and access the same information there. So with nodes, there's file sharing. That's the most common one, because rather than downloading from one spot, you can download it from 100 spots, and they all act as servers. But it's a lot simpler because it's just the software you download. You don't have to set anything up, and the benefit of a node is that it's faster and more secure, just because there's not that one party controlling it. Like CNN servers, there's one person controlling that or one corporation controlling that. And you're more than welcome to ask questions at any time. Some can be a bit more intense than others, though. And the nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they're gone. So that means that even if you turn your computer off and receive a Bitcoin when you're offline, as soon as your computer turns back online, it sends a message to the million other nodes out there saying, hey, what happened while I was gone? And since every transaction is being sent to every node, they can start re-downloading the information until it's all caught up. So each node is kind of like teamwork, where each node is relying off another, but there's no fail points there since there's so many nodes. And it's kind of like a mesh network, which Mary, Jane, and I were talking about to propose to the city. That the certain types of networks, you have one line, it fails, and it wipes out the entire thing. With the mesh node network, you can have one fail, everything's still online. Like that example right there, you shut down one computer, the network's still online. So like Wells Fargo could go offline at any time, you can access your online banking, just because it relies on one organization's server. With this, it's relying on millions of servers, and not all of just one of the millions of servers. And these are a few common questions that I've heard over the years of me being involved in Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin mining? So more or less, it is creating Bitcoins just out of thin air. But how Bitcoin works to make sure that every transaction is compliant, that they're not just changing a couple zeros to ones and giving themselves a legitimate 50 Bitcoins. Each transaction is sent to a whole bunch of those nodes, and these nodes are running complex math algorithms to make sure that they're more or less legitimate. So it's using it takes a lot of computing power just because of the algorithms behind it. And in the early days, you're able to compute it on hand. You could mine a block of Bitcoins, which was 50 Bitcoins, in about an hour on hand. And now it's a lot more complex than that just because there's these servers out there that can do those a million of them in just a minute. And not many people can do that by hand.
I did want to add that there's a lot of byproduct that's been generated because of Bitcoin mining. There are servers and they're generating a lot of heat and energy. So people have been using those to heat homes or heat businesses, and to, of course, they have to cool them as well. So they try to keep them in areas that it's a good temperature for them to keep that. But as with all energy, it's nice to repurpose that for greater use.
And there was actually a company that was creating servers to mine Bitcoins, and they ran out of server space. They didn't have any room in their data center, and it was just too costly to build another data center. So what they did was they offered people to install these servers inside their house, and they paid for the electricity bill. All the homeowners needed to do was allocate the space, and what they got was heat. That it did heat up the house because these do generate a lot of heat with all of the complex equations running through it every single second. So that was just interesting, and that was on the earlier days of Bitcoin. Right now, Bitcoin mining is getting less and less, there's a lot less and less potential of it just because lots of the Bitcoins are mined, so it's the bigger companies that are mining Bitcoins. And the one difference with Bitcoin mining that we'll get into a bit further in the presentation is that Bitcoin mining is kind of like printing money on the press, except that it's generated at a set amount of time. So you can tell exactly how many Bitcoins will be in circulation in 2079 if you run the right equations. And with the US dollar, there's no real way to tell that. So overall, it ensures that secure, tamper-resistant network, making it a secure place, and making sure that no one gets their funds stolen, or that the value of Bitcoin isn't artificially inflated or deflated. And the blockchain. This is the biggest one that I hear being thrown around by lots of investors, corporations, and that's what it can be a lot of times, just a buzzword to make their company sound Web 2.0 or cool to being the latest thing. And there are many use cases for it, like I said before, clocking in and clocking out of work. That putting that in the blockchain makes sure that no one can change it. As once it's in there, it's secure. So there are definitely good use cases for that I'd love to see. And the healthcare industry is one that's kind of starting to use it to store patient data, and that's kind of controversial just because that is private information. They said that they found a way to be able to store that securely inside the blockchain. And with that too, that a hospital loses your data, it's gone. They might have backups, but what if they don't have the backups? With the blockchain, it's on those millions and millions of servers. And the blockchain, I think the blockchain is going to far exceed Bitcoin just because of the amount of technologies that you can bring with it. And it's audible too, I forgot to mention that, but it's audible meaning that anyone can see it. So you send a Bitcoin transaction from person A to person B, you can see online, anywhere, anyone can see that person A sent person B 10 Bitcoins. But it is still private. You can't prove who person A or who person B is. It's just an anonymous identifier. So it works if you want to prove it, but if you're trying to stay anonymous, it also does that at the same time. So you still have the best of both worlds. And Bitcoin's purpose, we talked about that in that very long, drawn-out segment, but it eliminates banks from being the center of every financial transaction out there. It makes it so you're the bank, and that you don't have to pay those ridiculous fees if you accidentally bounce a check. And then it forms that record that cannot be changed. Like I said before, the blockchain, that I banked with a smaller bank before, and my records got mixed up where they took money out the wrong account and then took it out twice when I tried putting it back. With a blockchain, that's something that can't happen because it's just you and mathematical equations. So there's no real room for human error in it. And then this is kind of new, but Bitcoin Cash. So right now, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash are basically brothers of each other with the same overall concept. Except Bitcoin was made back in 2009, and in 2009 they weren't thinking on this global scale. They didn't know it was going to take off to be something this popular. So it has a 1 megabyte transaction size, which just means that less transactions can fit into a single block. And that's what mining is. It confirms each and every block. So it means that it can slow down at times. And when it slows down, what you can do is you can set the transaction fee higher, and that makes your transactions process faster. But the problem with that is that it becomes more and more expensive to spend Bitcoins. It becomes slower to spend Bitcoins just because there's so many people doing it now. So Bitcoin Cash is the exact same thing as Bitcoin, except they increased the transaction size, which makes it cheaper because there's more transactions you can fit in a single block. And it makes it faster, and it's a bit more scaled version. So some people refer to it as Bitcoin 2.0 just because it's taken all those problems from the original Bitcoin and it's made it something new. And no one really knows if it's going to stick around or be as popular as Bitcoin since it only came out in 2017, so it's still relatively new to the market. And they do trade at different prices too, so it is its own separate marketplace. It's just the technology behind it that's improved, and that's what they're focusing on. And then we're just going to take a short 5 to 7 minute break right here. Do any of you have any questions?
You can just drive on if you want.
All right.
Yeah.
So just a simple SWOT analysis on Bitcoin: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So start off strengths. Like I said before, it's decentralized. There's not one entity controlling it, and that's a common misconception people have about Bitcoin. Like, there's no one company that has that full control, but there's no forgot password option if you lose your Bitcoins, and that's kind of a scary thing for some people because you have to make sure that you're storing it securely. And lower fees, since there isn't that centralized partner storing the information and having to verify each and every transaction, the fees are much lower. And that's where mining comes into. That when you send a transaction, that fee gets paid to the miners as a whole. So that's the reward that miners get for, using all of their electricity and generating that heat and paying for those servers. They get a small chunk of every transaction that's sent. And privacy, like I said before, you can send Bitcoins from person A to person B and you can see that transaction, but no one can prove that person A is you or person B is you. And before we were talking about data analytics before the presentation, and that's something that people kind of worry about. They don't want to be tracked. They don't want people to know what they're buying in the store every day. And with your credit card, it's the same 16 digits every time. You can link a purchase to that credit card. You can link every visit to that credit card. With Bitcoin, it's different every time, so they can't be tracking it, and that's where the privacy comes in. And the no chargebacks, this is an important thing for small businesses. That if you're a catering company, you do a $3,000 order for a wedding, everything goes great, but at the end of it, the bride wasn't satisfied with the quality, she can perform a chargeback on the transaction, and banks normally decide to stand with the consumer over the bank or over the business.
I do want to add here, I myself is a small business owner, and I would say 80%, maybe 75% of my business is through charges. It's happened a number of times, but when the banks are loaning money, they ask you those poignant questions about what percentage do you do that are credit card sales. And so you answer honestly, and through, of course, you know what your sales are, and they're like, oh, you're too high risk. So that happens more often than you know because of the higher sales that I have, but also higher credit card charges, and it poses a lending risk to banks because of the service. Sometimes the service is not as tangible, and you get charged back, and that just ruins a lot of the credit or a lot of risk to the banks.
Exactly. And then in that catering industry, that it's already done. You've already prepared that order. It's done. It's gone. It's eaten. The time's used. They perform that chargeback. You just lost $3,000 and have no recourse just because they were dissatisfied with the quality. But you still have to pay your staff. You still have to pay for the expenses out of it. So not only did that business lose the original income, they lost more money because they had actually paid to have that customer. Now with Bitcoin, as soon as you send it, that Bitcoin's sent, it's gone, it's theirs. So I send Mary Jane 1 Bitcoin, there's no way I can get it back unless she's willing to send it back to me.
Very nice.
And that's the great thing about international transactions, that I can have an international transaction in my bank account, and the second I see it there, I know it's secure. I know that no one's scamming me. I know that that money is actually mine. With a wire transfer, that money can be reversed 3 to 7 to 30 days later. And the weaknesses, there are some weaknesses to Bitcoin, and lots of these weaknesses are, there's ways to get around them, or at least to embrace them too. Like the vulnerability to theft. That's more so like Mt. Gox before. Mt. Gox was that online exchange, and there's been other exchanges that have been breached too, and the majority of what causes that are weak passwords. That I've dealt with many clients before who share their passwords, and their passwords are something as simple as password, or password with an @ sign instead of an A. And with that, that's how most people get their Bitcoin stolen. If you were to store your Bitcoins properly in an offline wallet, there's no way anyone could get into that unless they guess that 108,000 character password, which is nearly impossible. And luckily you don't have to remember it. You get an 18 character random key, and you write that down. Those Bitcoins are yours. No one else can touch it aside from you. And that also kind of hurts the security factor. That's where it kind of hurts too, that it is an extremely secure coin, that you lose that key of yours, it's gone. You can't forgot your password like you can with Facebook or anything, just because building that option in will make it an inherent security risk. Kind of like that Apple situation where Apple is required to unlock that iPhone, and I forgot which case it was, but they were required to unlock an iPhone, and they weren't willing to do it because creating that software that unlocks iPhones is an inherent security risk for every phone out there. And that's with Bitcoin too, that unlocking that wallet for that one person that actually lost that password means that there is a possibility that that could be taken advantage of by people who don't have the best intentions. And volatile, the Bitcoin market is extremely volatile. As you saw, there were a few dips in there, and we're talking about 7 cents from 5 years ago versus $6,000. And there are ways to get around that too with the online payment processors, where you can convert your Bitcoin to US dollars instantly. So opportunities, international payment acceptance. So my business, over 60% of my revenue comes from countries outside the United States. And working with countries outside the United States, normally the biggest concern is payments. That how do they send you money over? How do you deal with the currency conversion fees or the long waiting times? That's where Bitcoin really helps me personally. That I can have a project done that same week because I get the payment, it confirms instantly. I know I have the money in my account, and it also converts it to US dollars, so I can pay my employees or pay my bills with it, and I don't have to pay those crazy conversion fees. And it doesn't follow local inflation. So there's been countries that do this, like the Zimbabwe dollar, that you can have a million Zimbabwe dollars for roughly probably $3 now. So the US, in theory, could print out money at any time, and doing that would artificially inflate the value of the US dollar. With Bitcoin, it's set at that set exponential generation. So if the US dollar were to be broken somehow in that way, Bitcoin would be unaffected by it. It would be just as strong as it previously was. And threats to Bitcoin, government regulation. That's the one that people worry about the most, just because it is disrupting to the government or banks. It is breaking into a multi-billion-dollar industry. And with the privacy, it is harder to see who's spending money, and the government likes to see where you're spending your money. And 51% tax, we talked about that before, and Bitcoin Cash kind of helps out with that too. But 51% of tax aren't as big of a threat as they were before, just because as a community we've come together and thought of ways to prevent something like that from happening. And this is a question that I get quite often too. Could the US government ever regulate or ban Bitcoin? They couldn't really ever regulate it or ban Bitcoin itself, but they could regulate the principles around it. For example, taxes. They could decide to tax it a bit differently, or make you follow a whole bunch of tax codes that make it too confusing, where businesses just don't want to deal with it. It's easier just to step back and not deal with the hassle. And they could enact laws making it more difficult for consumers to accept Bitcoin. So an example of this is the state of New York. They created a BIT license, and any business that's dealing with accepting or selling Bitcoins has to register for a BIT license. And it's $4,000 just to submit the paperwork, and then you have to have that legal staff or your lawyers, and overall it'll probably cost around $70,000 to $100,000 just to be allowed to use Bitcoin. And many states aren't like that. The majority of states aren't, but some states like New York are a bit more regulated on that, and as a small business, you couldn't afford to do that, especially not just for trying the new technology, which most businesses are doing. And they can tell people not to use Bitcoin. Not just saying, hey, don't use Bitcoin, but they could sell you the name of it. Like there is an illegal marketplace online, the Silk Road, that they shut down, and they primarily use Bitcoin just because it's that online untraceable currency. And after that, that really hurt Bitcoin just because it got associated with that Bitcoin's only for illegal drugs. If you use Bitcoin, you're probably buying illegal drugs. And I kind of relate the same thing as the police saying that you only need a lawyer if you're guilty. And Bitcoin's recovered from that because there's been a lot more useful purposes of Bitcoin, such as donations to charities, where it's a lot easier for charities to accept donations from anywhere in the world and not having to deal with those 30% fees they pay to whoever's collecting money. It goes straight to them. And that's a great point. They have no reason to. It's taxed the same as cash currently. It's treated the same as cash, and there's not much different aside from it just being on your phone or your computer. That they're both peer-to-peer, that I give you $10, no one outside of that transaction knows I gave you $10. And anonymous, and they're both payment methods. You accepted that $10, you accepted that 0.1 Bitcoin. And with the anonymity, that's, like I said before, what scared the government is that they don't like the anonymity just because they can't see what's happening. And with cash, they kind of can regulate a bit more just because I believe it's, I'm not sure of the actual amount, but any transaction above X amount in US dollars has to be reported to the government, and then you have to give them your name, your driver's license number, and all of your personal information. So there's still that record of it, and that's also why they don't like it, because there is no record of this, and currently they haven't regulated a way to make that record. So that's something that they could potentially do in the future. And again, they could never shut down Bitcoin, but if people have to jump through all these hoops to be able to use Bitcoin, they might not be as likely to do so. They just don't want to deal with the headache and step back. And that's the only real thing about that is just seeing what the future holds. And this is a quote that really spoke to me. Andreas Antonopoulos, he was a published author in the blockchain industry. Why would anyone trust nerd money versus central bank money? So nerds brought you the internet, banks brought you the Great Depression. So I like that quote just because it shows that the internet's moving forward, and that's why lots of people are scared of it too, just because it's new and uses words that people don't always understand. And then banks have been there forever, and banks have gotten into lots of trouble. There's lots and lots of news you hear just about banks being corrupt, or a bank doing this and getting into trouble, or scamming their consumers. At Bitcoin, there's not really that opportunity to be happening to them. No one can get greedy over it. There's not that one person that controls it. Like with a bank, they can force you to submit false applications just because there's somebody benefiting from that. With Bitcoin, the only person that will be benefiting is yourself. And the Bitcoin is open source. So what that means is that anyone can review the code, and that's great for security experts. Like your code for Wells Fargo, that could have been code from 1980. There could be 30 flaws in it right now, but no one knows it just because no one's ever seen it. With Bitcoin, the code is all online. You can see exactly what makes it tick and see if there's a vulnerability in it. And most importantly, anyone can contribute to the code. So if somebody finds that day one vulnerability in it that could attack a Bitcoin address, what they can do is they can fix it right there. And in the Bitcoin industry, there's lots of technology advocates who know how to fix it too. And this also means that there's a lot more features being updated on a regular basis. Like I said before, banks do use outdated software. That's not an unknown fact. Most ATMs still run Windows XP, which was released a long, long time ago. And their ACH transfers are built on a software from the 1980s, 1990s. Bitcoin, their latest update of it was probably earlier this morning.
Jonathan, just one point is some of the best run companies in the world have community sourcing, the open source, because if it's that way everybody can see what's going on, and as you said, they can fix it, but also they come up with new ideas and new opportunities, and that keeps things always fresh and moving forward. So open source is definitely something that's looked upon as a positive in the industry.
That's where Bitcoin Cash came from, that they saw these problems with Bitcoin, but they wanted Bitcoin to be its own thing. So what they did is they just copied the code and made they call it a fork, where you basically just clone the old one and make a new one out of it. So they made those modifications because there's some people that don't want longer block sizes. They want the original core Bitcoin. but then the people who want the new code can make their own and have their own network running, and the software is already there. I work, the cryptocurrency side of my business helps people create the coins that they want. There's coins for every reason. Some people want to do it to drive a fundraiser. Well, they want to make it act differently anyway, so they get rewarded for keeping coins in your wallet, like an interest payment. Instead of, you keep Bitcoins in your Bitcoin wallet, they just stay there, nothing changes. This one Bitcoin wallet is worth one Bitcoin. And then who uses Bitcoin? Reddit, a social media network, was one of the first online instances to accept Bitcoin. And they saw a massive growth of premium users that day, just because the day they started accepting Bitcoin, just because they were one of the first. Everybody wanted to go to them just to be able to spend their Bitcoin, just because there's not many other places you can spend it. And Overstock's a great one too, the furniture website. They started selling their products accepting Bitcoin, and that created massive growth for them, just because, again, they're one of the first in the market.
I have a couple more to add to that I just thought were quite interesting. KFC in Canada has started to use it. Playboy, Subway, Cheap Air. You think you have Expedia on there? Yes. And Bitcoin.travel. So a lot of travel. The mobile gaming company Zynga uses it. Etsy's using Cash. The last month I was looking for a used vehicle for my son, and one of the criteria that you could check off was accepts cryptocurrency right on Craigslist. I was like, wow, that's really good.
Did you pay for your car in Bitcoin?
No. And so a lot of pizza companies, limousine companies, Mint is another, like a PayPal type portal. You can pay for Bloomberg online newspaper, Sun-Times, Chicago-based newspaper. A lot of people are starting to use it over and over. There was another big, Dish Network. And some of the parties, the political parties are starting to use it. So it's coming mainstream. Intuit, I don't know if that's on there, no, Intuit, which is a financial service, for your taxes and things. And the Republican Party, it's on and on. It's just going through this is over 100 different people. And Whole Foods is using it as well. So it's coming.
So definitely more and more businesses are starting to use it every day. These are some of the original businesses that started accepting it. And personally, Namecheap, they're a competitor to GoDaddy, where you can purchase cheap hosting or domain names. And they personally won me over just because they're the first to accept Bitcoin. Like I said before, I had 10,000 Bitcoin. I had to spend it on something. So instead of paying with a credit card or paying with cash, I could register domains online. And even 4 years later, I don't pay with Bitcoin when I register those domains, but Namecheap still won my loyalty over just because they're one of the first, and I know that they're up to date on their technology and hungry for new customers, when other companies like GoDaddy are kind of stagnant and just happy with what they have. Kind of shows that they're just staying still, when Namecheap is an example of a company that's moving forward. And that's exactly what Bitcoin does, that people see these small businesses involved with these large technologies. They know that they care about what's going on. And especially for like-minded individuals, Namecheap targets web developers or IT people. And that's what Bitcoin was originally for back in 2011, 2009. And how does this help you? Like I said before, lower transaction fees. That banks charge anywhere from 2.9% to 4% for a credit card transaction. And then if you have a chargeback, you have to pay $35 plus that chargeback amount, and you lose that income. And with Bitcoin or any of the other altcoins, there are no chargebacks or fees like that. Instant transactions. That's my favorite benefit of it. That check. When you deposit a check, you have to wait the 5 to 7 days for it to clear to even know if it's going to get to your account. With Bitcoin, once you see that balance on your account, it's yours. There's no additional verification or waiting period. And then processing fees. So as you can see here, BitPay is a Bitcoin processor. And what they do is they take your Bitcoin and convert it to US dollars instantly. Just because your landlord might not accept Bitcoin, you need to still cut him the check. So BitPay will take your Bitcoin and send you it the next day to your checking account. And as you can see here, they only charge 1%. So $1 for every $100 in transactions. When Stripe or Square, some of the common payment processors, are up in the $3.25 or $275 just for a $100 transaction. And that can be a big chunk for a small business's revenue. And then there's target companies like Heartland Payments where they are a bit more personalized, but they also charge a higher fee than Square or Stripe when they add in all the equipment readers that you have to pay the $300 a month to have a few credit card terminals. On Bitcoin, you just pay that 1% with BitPay, and it's treated exactly the same as Stripe, Square, or PayPal.
Just quickly, all of those items, except for BitPay, are being used by website developers every day. You know, we use a lot of Heartland for clients that are over $5,000 a month, PayPal and Square about the same processing fee. And Stripe, as John's pointed out to me, is to be more for developers because you can do a lot of coding to be able to have automated payments and stuff. So you can see the incentive there for developers to help save money for their clients and to bring in new processes because everything, again, is online shopping, online transactions, and this is just the way things are going.
So not only is it more secure, it's also a whole lot cheaper. And then everyone always has their rebuttals for it too. But what about the volatility? So that's what I was saying before. That's exactly where BitPay comes in. That BitPay takes away that vulnerability of volatility. That you take that $100 Bitcoin payment, BitPay makes sure you get that. Make sure that you get that $100 in cash when Bitcoin could change the next day and your payment's only worth $95 if you didn't send it to BitPay. And the government. So there isn't anything illegal with using Bitcoin. That's 100% the same as accepting cash, except there's just a bit less reporting. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure your books are up to date, that you're recording these transactions to prove, if anyone were to question them, that they're legitimate. Just because there is that level of anonymity inside it. And then what I want you to reflect on is how you can integrate Bitcoin into your business. There has been a business that I've ever seen where Bitcoin would not personally help it in a certain way. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions?
So was this enlightening to anybody? Did it bring out some, or is this something that we're just curious of things that people have known before?
I'm so confused. I mean, so if I wanted to accept Bitcoin for my business, how many people out there would potentially be paying me in Bitcoin?
So Bitcoin's still a growing market, so it depends on what kind of business you have. But like with those companies I listed before, they got tons and tons of new business when they started accepting Bitcoin from that Bitcoin community just because they're new. So it's gaining an entire new audience to your business. Like there was colleges that were accepting Bitcoin and people want to go to those colleges just because they're one of the first to accept that new technology.
So you find this is more of a younger person's thing, or are there
The age of it is kind of surprising to me that I've seen people that were 17, 18, but I've also seen the 60-year-olds that are engineers that are extremely interested in it. So I don't think there's a real age correlation with it.
It's intelligence.
But there are, like a mom and pop shop on the corner, that might not be as beneficial to use Bitcoin, but there's no downside in having it. Like a payment processor like Heartland, you have to pay that monthly fee to use their equipment. With BitPay, you only pay if you actually use it, so there's no risk to it. If somebody wants to pay with Bitcoin, they can, but if you only get people that use their credit cards, you're just where you were before. It's just giving them the extra opportunity and getting that free PR for being the first business in Waukesha to accept Bitcoin. And the first business in Waukesha to accept Bitcoin will be a great news article too, and I'm sure that'll get some attention in the Bitcoin community and in the local papers.
Thought you already had that one.
But we're a bit more international, so.
How many colleges or universities in Wisconsin use Bitcoin?
I haven't seen any in Wisconsin yet. Most of them are online colleges, just because it's an online currency. But I have heard that they're starting to look at it as an option. It's just that there's a lot of legal liabilities with that cost time and money. But the most impressive thing I've seen is that there are lots of these people that bought Bitcoin when it was at trading at 5 cents, 7 cents, and bought thousands of them, forgot about it, and then 2015 they cashed out. So they had lots of money and they went out and bought a Ferrari. So Ferrari dealers started selling their cars online accepting Bitcoin. And there's great stories about that, and lots of stories, just because without Bitcoin, that's not something they would have ever had the opportunity to do.
So a little bit, with John and I and doing what we do and trying to be on that edge, it takes us to get into the community and let them know about these things and the opportunities. And then the people that are willing to take the step forward, you know, a little bit of a risk taker, but you know, here we have a lot of good experience of why to do it. You know, that's what we're looking for in the community. Waukesha is so unique. You know, we have so many possibilities here, and we've been working towards those. And yes, if we can get more people to use Bitcoin, I think that it'll just give us another opportunity in the marketplace to kind of change things. I mean, people like Uber changed things alone with Stripe and PayPal. They changed the way banking was done. There's a lot of that going on. And as things evolve, you know, let's evolve with it. So that's what we're trying to do here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.